supporting people that want to be in development because, again, there's a need for developers. And I do this today. I think you need a team that knows every facet of it. And so I would encourage people to connect with other developers or mentors, people that have been down this road, because it's great to have an idea and that's what gets you going. And we all need people we can lean on to let us know, help us find the pathway forward.
Well, good day, everyone. This is another episode of the Wealth and Real Estate Development Podcast, better known as WIRED. I am your host, Nick Smith. We have a great episode in front of us today. I do want to thank everybody that has been, supporting the podcast, sharing the podcast, liking the podcast. Definitely encourage people to. I want to hear from you for sure. And great news, we did just recently get uploaded into Apple Podcasts. So you can get us now in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much everywhere that you get your podcast. So definitely grateful for that. That took a little bit of time, but we got it done. So we're now pretty much everywhere that you can get podcasts. So today's episode, I have a very, very special guest, and it's amazing how our paths cross because they're working on, or her and some partners, they're working on a very instrumental project in a town that's here in Hammond, Indiana. And I used to actually, during the pandemic, I used to exercise by walking through the downtown of this area. And I used to pass this building all the time. And I used to always wonder who was working on this building, who was kind of behind this development, because we're going to get into it. And lo and behold, I went to a breakfast a few months ago, and there she was, one of the main partners in this development. So I have with me today Miss Anastacia Fratto, correct? Am I pronouncing your last name right?
Yeah, perfect.
Good deal. Anastacia is the founder of ResElevate, which has been in existence going on 8 years, where they do development consulting and also act as strategic operating partners in various development projects. So, Anastacia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our conversation today.
It is truly a pleasure. How about you give a brief introduction as to who you are, how you got your start in real estate, and what you're currently doing?
Yeah, that sounds great. So I've been in real estate development going on 16 years. I started with a family in Chicago doing master plan community development. And I tell people it was sort of a hand of God moment for me in my life, because I was at Dominican University and I was taking a master's class, and my teacher at the time had said, "Hey, you really like real estate." I had gotten my real estate license. I sold my teacher's homes. That's how I paid for college.
Nice.
You're always talking about real estate. And I think, well, I have a friend of mine who's looking to hire somebody. And lo and behold, we, had coffee and breakfast, and I ended up working for her for 10 years and started in 2006. And so when you think about, just before the Great Recession, having sort of an acquisitions title in a period where not a lot of people were doing anything, right? Because the numbers weren't working and the housing bubble happened and the market crashed. And so I was really fortunate to be part of that team and get to do a ton of different things related to development over those 10 years. And eventually once we sort of got a hold and things sort of stabilized a little bit, we did expand in this part. So I had helped expand to Tampa, they were in Tampa already, but we had purchased additional land in Tampa, Phoenix, looked all over the country, frankly, for opportunities. Nashville and some of those other high growth markets, which was a great experience. After being there for 11 years, was wanting to challenge a little bit, right? I went and worked for D.R.E.D, public builder. So I went from a private company to a publicly traded home builder, a very different worlds and culture there. And it was great. It was great. So I focused mostly on the Chicagoland market. And then I was there for exactly 1 year. And I felt like, Nick, I felt like at that point in my career, I was 30. I had one daughter at the time, maybe it was 32. I felt like kind of just getting my feet dirty and trying some new things and seeing where the world called me. So I left and started ResElevate, and with the mission to elevate opportunities for all. I was really always had this sort of desire to be part of communities that needed new development, but weren't your typical high growth market. And so that's kind of how ResElevate came about. And we have a handful of people that we work with that we're happy working with these developers, and we'll do everything from, consulting and just on the front end to the actual development operations side. But I would say what I love most is just finding the opportunities and then getting them done, which is a process.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. Given kind of our current economic, environment and just the overall society, I mean, prices have gone up, and just various things, inflation, which I think is somewhat tamed a little bit now, but it was very out of control the last few years. How are you all actually, finding viable opportunities right now?
Yeah, I think you need to have a little bit of a longer term view and sort of, I think you need to have an expectation of where rates are right now. That obviously where interest rates right now and just where the capital markets are, particularly for, development, housing development, it's more difficult to make the numbers work and for investors to be excited about a project. But it's absolutely still happening, and it's just finding the right site and the right opportunity, and also giving yourself some time to be able to work through that. At the same time, a lot of the stuff that I've been focused on recently, there's a lot of layers in the capital stack. So I'm really loving this workforce housing, and we'll talk about Bank of Calumet in a few minutes, but oftentimes you need gap fillers, right? Because construction costs are really high. Now your interest rates are really high, and that doesn't put a whole lot of where land value could be, frankly. And then you also have to be able to find some incentives to make these projects work. And I think, my experience in Indiana, and I love Indiana. I love Northwest Indiana, and there's so much growth that's happened. And I think, with the South Shore expansion between the double track and the Westlake expansion, there's a tremendous amount of opportunities that precede us in the sense that, decades of planning and people that have been championing this region for long before I started looking in Northwest Indiana. There's a moment right now to really build great developments and provide lifestyle opportunities that may or may not exist in some of the communities. And often for that type of development, you do need some sort of fillers. So I think so after 16 years, and you probably see this too, Nick, you look at the site and you'll get excited about it, and then it doesn't really work out. And somehow it always comes back around to you, right? It could be a few years, and if it, and so you never really say no, but just keep those relationships open. And I think that the good sites will always sort of stand out for themselves, frankly.
Right. No, as they say, the good Lord is not making any more dirt. So it's
That's right.
dirt is definitely whoever holds the dirt holds the gold.
Yeah,
For sure,
yeah,
for sure.
exactly.
You mentioned workforce housing, and that was one of the things I wanted to ask you. Is workforce housing as ResElevate, when you do your development consulting and even act as kind of strategic partners in various developments, is kind of that workforce housing sector, is that kind of the area that you focus on, or there are other types of developments that you also work on?
Yeah. I would say workforce housing I'm very passionate about that
Gotcha.
because, but we do everything. We've done industrial, master plan communities, mixed use. Um, but what I really love about workforce is a term that's used, attainable housing. It's really housing for the middle market, right?
Right.
And how do you provide new opportunities for people to live in places that are, safe, right?
Right. Right.
That they can maintain at a price point that they can afford. And, you know, coming out of this great recession cycle, and then even most recently where costs are, yeah, it's very difficult, to provide new housing at affordable prices. And there's this huge gap in the market. If you're a for-profit developer, you automate, if you're not getting incentives, you automatically sort of lend yourself to sort of supply new opportunities and cater this
Right.
upper market. And then on the flip side, if you're a true affordable housing developer, we are not, but if you're a true affordable housing developer, then you kind of have benchmarks that you have to live in with your, AMI
Right.
threshold, things like that. And so then what happens in the middle,
Right.
right? So how do you think creatively to offering new housing opportunities when it's challenging? So that's why I would say it's very exciting. I feel very strongly that we need to continue as an industry to figure out how to do that. And, we've seen, modular companies come in that can maybe offer, their intent is to be able to offer um, housing, for in that middle tier. We've seen people do smaller single family homes to try to get that entry price lower. But when I was just having this conversation with somebody last week, when I started in master plan community development, and even when I was working for a public home builder, we always focused on your monthly rent price, right? Like at the end of the day, what's the monthly payment for folks?
Mhm.
And that price then, was around $2,200 a month, right? Like, can you offer, and this is again, master plan communities, so development outside of the urban core, but
Right.
you offer a new home where your monthly payment's going to be around, let's just call it $2,200, $2,600 a month. Today, there's no way to do that. I mean, there's absolutely no way to do that. You're automatically forced to be, I shouldn't say there's no way, but most of the industry is now automatically with where the rates are and things like that, it over $3,000, $3,500 a month. And so that's a big change just in the last 10 years of where pricing has gone. And so that's one of the about Bank of Calumet is that, our average would be around $1,300 a month. So really, for the quality of the unit you get to live in. Again, we're not affordable housing in the affordable housing, but we are folks that want to be part of a changing and a great that has now, it's going to have, 3 train stations in Hammond,
Right.
and you have tremendous connectivity with that. So I hope that answered your question a little bit about workforce housing, but there's a lot, and I'm sure, Nick, can you see that in your developments too, when you're looking at things of how do we, where you can push it and where you can't, and then, but at the end of the day, wanting to provide something, create something that most people can take part in. Does that make sense?
Oh no, 100%, 100%. I mean, there's a term now being called, or is coined, the missing middle.
Yeah.
And a lot of people kind of forget about the middle, because kind of people in that lower income tier, there are a lot of resources, available, kind of in that lower income tier. I mean, with low income housing tax credits, I mean, Section 8, various programs, housing related. And then, I mean, of course, your upper echelon, you're truly financially wealthy, financially savvy people. They're kind of set, when it comes to their housing, unless, I mean, they just suffer catastrophic losses. I mean, they're probably not going to be homeless.
Right.
But it's that middle that kind of gets neglected. People that are not necessarily poor, so to speak, and are not wealthy either. But you kind of forget about that. Forget about that sector. I never forget when we were building new homes, and we were using, when I was working for the city of East Chicago, and we were using, I don't know if you remember this program, but it was NSP, the Neighborhood Stabilization program, through stimulus dollars. And had a guy come in, he was so excited. He wanted to buy his new home, was super excited, came in my office, and I had to have the discussion of income with him. And, he was probably maybe about 10,000 more than what the income guidelines allow. But because of that, he could not participate in that program. He could not purchase one of those homes, and he left dumbfounded. He said, most of the time I get told I don't make enough money, but now I make too much money. So
Right.
it's definitely a problem that needs addressed, in our country, for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's incredible. And I've heard those stories too from some friends of mine, and it sort of hones in on why everybody needs to just spend a little bit of attention on this, because there are so many people. To your point, this missing middle is quite large, right? And very important. So, but yeah, so we're in just thinking about kind of, I know you and I connected talking about Hammond, and I think it's so cool that you used to have a house right there, walk through downtown.
Yeah, for sure. So let's go there, because you've mentioned Bank of Calumet several times. I won't keep the listeners waiting anymore any longer. So what is the Bank of Calumet, or as you all have coined it, the Bank? Explain that development to my listeners.
Yeah. So the building was built in 1924. So next year, when we open, hopefully it'll be the 100th year anniversary of the building.
Oh, wow. That's ironic. And
yeah, it's just very cool. It's a 9-story building. It was back in the day when it was built, it was a skyscraper. I mean, we found some old cool newspaper articles of one of the tallest buildings in the region. And I think it is still the tallest building in Hammond, but it sat vacant for a long time, 6 or 7, maybe 7 years now. And there was about 6 feet of water in the basement. And we had been following just sort of Hammond's plan to revitalize downtown. And, and back in the day, downtown Hammond was thriving.
Oh, yeah.
Thriving place with shops, and families would come out and spend their time in downtown Hammond and eat. And the longer we've been part of this, the more cool stories we hear about people and sort of their ties to not only downtown Hammond, but Bank Calumet opening their first checking account, working there. A lot of the lenders in the region at some point seem to have worked in Bank Calumet. So people know the building, and we think it's an important building for downtown to revitalize. City had done a just spec plan back in 2019, and they had actually identified the base vision. We just answered really the call, but they identified Bank Calumet as a mixed use project, and they were looking for residential conversion and commercial on the ground floor. And so the building lends itself well. It's an L-shaped building, had a corridor right in the middle. The width is good, width and depth so you can have a double loaded corridor. You can have units on both sides of the hallway, right? So we had right away started to take a look at it, and it's a $27 million project, um, and we're partnered with NWI Development Group and ASA Development Group on this, and we had talked to the city of Hammond. There were obviously a lot of things that needed to be done for us and for our team and our investors to make sense of sort of putting new housing down here. And I think, Hammond set the vision, right, with the Jeff spec plan, but I think more importantly, they actually started executing on that vision. So
Right.
Mayor Tom has done an amazing job, and his team, just with all the infrastructure improvements and bike paths and things that they have done that kind of connects sort of this nucleus of downtown, right? And they also had planned and have now under construction on their Home and Avenue infrastructure improvement. So that's slowing down the traffic on Home and Avenue. So it makes it a more walkable community. And if you're familiar with Chicago, I tell people, go to Randolph Street, you see sort of center parking, right? You have parking right in the center, and then, parking off to the side. So it's, there's sort of the infrastructure is going to provide this, hey, we want to stop, we want to get out of the car, we want to walk around. And so that is all happening. And then certainly you have the South Shore expansion for the Westlake expansion, and with the Gateway Station, Hammond is building a new train station 2 blocks away from us in downtown Hammond. And then you have a new station being built at 173rd by Purdue. So you look at this city, which is one of the largest cities in Lake County, who's now going to have 3 transit stations in the city boundaries. And all of that infrastructure investment that has been invested and is under construction, it really provides a great, moment and opportunity to, to really move this plan forward, right? And so we are one of the first projects to come to private projects to offer housing. There's a plan to have 500-600 new housing units in downtown Hammond over the next couple of years.
Right.
And the city is very aggressively moving that forward. So I think their confidence, their execution, frankly, is what gave us confidence to move forward. And, we're really excited. So floors, it's 9 stories. So floors 2 through 9 are all residential units. The ground floor, which is the old banking hall lobby area, 38 feet tall. It's just this beautiful, stellar space. And we're going to have an event space down there. We also have a coffee/pastry user that we're working with who played here. They'll be opening up next year and offering, some grab and goes and some coffee and different food and great food. So we're really excited about that. And the banking hall will also be, so we're planning about 40 to 50 events there a year. Corporate events, weddings, things like that. And on the days that it's not events, and those time blocks that it's not events, that space is going to be open for the residents. So if you live in the building and you want to, get on a call or meet with some of your friends, you can go down to the banking hall. It's going to be co-working lounge. And so that will be open for the residents. We're also planning on doing some like makers markets and things like that, so we can activate that space down there. And then we'll have a fitness center, a dog washing station. We do have a parking lot for our residents that would be gated and secured. And then we're also going to have bike storage and regular storage. So there's a lot of cool things happening inside the building for people that want to live in this urban environment, right? A lot of the multifamily development that's happened in the region has been garden style apartments. And so this is really, this adaptive reuse is going to provide this very urban lifestyle opportunity for folks. I mean, you still drive to downtown Hammond, but once you're there, you are able to really, go to the grocery store at Stratford Till, you can show Till Theater, you can go down to 18th Street and grab a bite. So there's a lot of great things that have happened in Hammond, and a lot of people that have really been the pioneers, I call them, before us that have created the sense of community and the sense of place that exists without us. I mean, we're just one building for 100 units in downtown. And so you really need, the community to come together, and you need the different offerings down there, which exist. And so a lot of great people in Hammond and downtown Hammond, particularly, that are sort of setting the tone for, the next sort of wave of development that we're kind of in the middle of right now.
Gotcha. Man, it is a awesome project. It's definitely something neat. I mean, that whole downtown transformation in Hammond is something I've been following closely again because I live so close to it. And it's amazing to see the progress that is going on in there. So I know that you mentioned there's going to be approximately about 100, residential units. What makeup of those units are 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and what kind of was the thought process in the unit mix, the kind of makeup in the units?
Yeah. So most of our units are 1 bedrooms, convertibles, and studios. Okay. We only have 3 2-bedroom units in the building, and that was done very purposely so that, overall we're providing, a chunk monthly rent price for folks, right? That they get to have this kind of lifestyle here. And, we're looking at, just as far as who's going to be in the building, living there, could be anybody. We believe that there's going to be a lot of young professionals that want to come and live in Hammond. And as we've done, as you know, Nick, we've done 1 million tours for the building with different people in the community and businesses and consultants, and everybody's like, hey, I want one of these units, right? Because I can have a unit in downtown Hammond and get to Chicago, in a half-hour drive, and then eventually you'll have a train station. You could still take the train at the gateway, but the proximity to Illinois is just really incredible. It's the first community outside of the Illinois border. And then, obviously the people that live in Hammond and the region to just, be part of it as well.
No, that's amazing. It's definitely amazing. And I can remember, I'm an 80s baby, so I was born in the 80s. And, during that period, it almost was, it seemed like there was a push away from urban living. People started moving to the suburbs and, malls started popping up, whereas downtown Hammond, I mean, a lot of the cities that were the core of Northwest Indiana and Lake County, East Chicago, Hammond, Gary, all of them had thriving downtowns, at one point in time, and Hammond's was one of by far the best. I mean, they had high-end clothing stores, restaurants, all of that. But when I started coming around, I started seeing it on the decline, and people kind of started moving away, wanting the larger single-family homes and, various things. Again, the shopping malls started taking the place. I can't remember when South Lake Mall actually was built in Maryville, but it was kind of not far from that era, in the 70s, 80s, when South Lake Mall was built. So, but now it kind of seems there is some interest in reversing that trend, where there's some desire for people to, stay in those urban areas where there's some life going on. There's some, you can do everything, within walking distance. You don't need to drive, and I had Sherry Ziller on from the Regional Development Authority a few months ago, and they're designating a lot of these areas around the train stations as transit development districts. What do you see kind of that trend happening in development as far as people coming back to, urban centers and urban cores?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I believe in abundance, right? So there's certainly market demand for these, bigger suburban communities to continue to grow. But I also think that it's extremely important for these cities that have this history of in downtown and the infrastructure and the architecture. How do we celebrate that? And it's, you can't recreate that. You can't rebuild that in a suburb. And so you have that here. How do we bring it to it? And so with, with the RDA, Sherry's work with these TDD districts and establishing and approving those boundaries, you're now able to create, a new funding mechanism to help motivate and incentivize development in these downtown cores. It's funny because you just touched a soft spot for me, because when I left ResElevate and I was going through our old mission statement, or when I left my corporate world to start ResElevate, and it really was, most of my time in my career was looking at large pieces of land, figuring out, right, where do you put the school and the church and the commercial and the grocery store and the housing? How do you create this community out of ground, right? And which is so beautiful, and that's a beautiful thing to do, right? And then we were really we formed and created from this place of, how do we do that same thing? How do we have that horizontal presence? But it's not going to be by the way of just buying a few hundred acres of land. It's going to be by the way of entrenching ourselves in these communities and, being able to really elevate one project at a time. So right. Now with other developers, with other community partners, and now everybody working together. And now you really create this lift, right? And it's more challenging to do that. And because, you have to have ownership. Somebody has to have ownership, right? And make the decision to make those investments. You have to have access and infrastructure, which in your urban cores, you usually have that anyway. So that's a win. But a lot of the communities struggle if they don't own the land that they're wanting to see revitalized, or they don't have owners in place that can, or even have the desire or the know-how to reinvest in these properties. So it's harder to get off the ground unless there's some control or some investment that there's certainty in investment that's going to happen. Does that make sense?
No, I definitely get it. It's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah.
for sure. Getting with the Calumet, because I do think with the decline in the office, kind of sector, just post-pandemic, the office sector has never rebounded since the pandemic. And I don't think it's ever going to get back to where it once was. You have this work from home phenomena it's a huge thing. A lot of people are working from home, and if they're not working from home 100%, it's a hybrid model, and I see a lot, even in downtown Chicago, a lot of your downtown urban places, you have a lot of these office buildings that are pretty much sitting vacant. And I do see a big future I'd say for the next several years, where you're going to see the term you coined, adaptive reuse of a lot of these buildings. Given the age of the property of the Bank Calumet building, it sat vacant for almost a decade. All of those, just factors. What are some of the challenges that you run into when you take on a project like this? An existing property that was built not as a residential structure. It was built for primarily office.
Right.
What are some of the challenges that you run into, and how are you able to kind of, mitigate those challenges, work through those challenges?
Right. Well, I think for true adaptive reuse, right? So building, to your point, that was absolutely occupied for office and that now wants to be sort of redeveloped for residential. I think the first thing, obviously, it's going to cost more than just building new construction, right? Because before you can even get to zero baseline, you have demolition expenses and like that. And so you have to recognize that in order to do that adaptive reuse, your costs are going to be higher than if you were going to build the same 100 units, down the street, right? New construction. And so that really, and this is my personal opinion, right? I think it would be almost impossible to do adaptive reuse you don't have incentives. Obviously there's always exceptions to the rule, and really in markets that, especially in markets that, support really cool high-end product, and pricing is more elastic, right? Like it doesn't matter as much as what the price of those units are going to be. But for a lot of the communities that have these office buildings, it's sort of, how do you fill the gap? Like, so for Bank of Calumet, for example, it's $27 million project, and we had to get TIF and state tax credits to make it work. And then even that, even making it work with that was challenging, right? So our capital stack is very layered. And so you have to have a little bit of patience to work through that, but I do think it is something that I think is broadly recognized as a need. I know the Department of Transportation has a new lending program out for this exact thing, that they've opened up to conversions for more affordable housing, a low interest loan, which certainly helps. A couple of points helps, but it's not the end all be all. There has to be some participation. It's just more costly to do it. And so, but again, if your end pricing is much higher, right? And if you're in a place where that can support a higher rent, or if you're doing condos or higher for sale, obviously that certainly helps, and maybe narrow that gap. But I really think that there's, having supportive partners related, public partners is going to be key for that.
Wow. No, and that's something, because a lot of people, ride by, you may have a dilapidated property such as the one that I have in East Chicago. I mean, that thing has been vacant, I know, all of 20 years. 20 to 25 years. It's been vacant for a long time. And people, you ride past those type of properties and you think, why isn't anybody doing anything with this building? Why isn't, anybody stepping in? And there is a major reality that in many instances, it is easier to build something from the ground up than to take an existing property and adaptively reuse it. I mean, when you build something from the ground up, you're starting from scratch. So, though there are still variables when you're building something from the ground up, definitely are not as many variables as when you're going into an existing property and having to literally gut, because again, you never know what you're going to find when you start opening up walls.
Right.
You never know.
And everybody really has to put their thinking cap on when they walk through, from the architects to the construction team. To your point, you don't know until you're actually in there doing it, for the most part. I mean, you can know as much as you can, but it's a constant evolution and change, like anything to that point. But yeah, well, that's exciting too about your East Chicago project. It's special to be able to have these older buildings have new life in them, right?
Right.
And they were there for a reason at some point in history, and they can serve a new purpose today. And it takes patience, I'm sure, Nick. You have a lot of to see it through.
No, for sure. Well, listen, we are coming up on time, and I know I gotta let you get on the road. I definitely appreciate you, taking a few moments. I know you're traveling right now, so I definitely appreciate you taking a few moments to, talk to my listeners and explain kind of this development process. If somebody was out there and they wanted to begin, doing development, whether it's existing property or building from the ground up, if somebody was starting from square one, they don't have any development experience, but they have some imagination, because that's what I think that's the biggest thing you have to have as a developer is a big imagination. You can't see things for what they are. You have to see things for what they can be. But if somebody is in that boat, don't have really the experience, may have a little bit of experience, what words of wisdom or words of advice would you give somebody in those shoes that wants to really kind of go down that path and explore this world of development?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that and supporting people that want to be in development, because again, everybody, there's a need for developers. And I do this today. I think you need a team that knows every facet of it. And so I would encourage people to connect with other developers or mentors, people that have been down this road, because it's great to have an idea, and that's what gets you going. And we all need people we can lean on to let us know, help us find the pathway forward, right? So that would be the first thing I would say is, connect with others who've done it. And if you can learn from somebody without having as much as you can, without having to go through and stub your toe yourself on everything, then that would be, at least in my opinion, first step.
Gotcha. No, that is excellent. I'm gonna end on this question. Development, for the most part, is highly, I say, male dominant. There's the bulk of your big name developers that people think about are male. Let's just kind of be for real. Being that you are a lady, you are a woman, have there been challenges, by you being a woman in development, and how have you been able to kind of overcome those challenges?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Of course there have been, right? And I think there have been challenges for everybody, right? Women or male. And yeah, I think that there's definitely some perceptions about, what role women would have in a development, and I just don't pay attention to it. I like to connect with people on a human level. I love people; they inspire me, and I just don't take any ownership to any of that stuff, and don't let it stick on me. And I think you definitely need thick skin if we're going to grow, no matter what you're doing, development or not. You need thick skin if you're going to grow personally, professionally, spiritually, And so, but yeah, there are moments, and I tell people I'm part of women's groups, and I tell people, other women, right? Like, I think the most, I've been in conference rooms with like really high executive women, and whenever the woman talks, the other woman's like on her phone texting, right? But when the man talks, they're present, right? And so I tell people is, you don't have to go change the world. You don't have to go invest all your money into these women, or, please do that, yes, but you don't have to go, put your name on something, but just be present. Like, when somebody's talking, be respectful, be present, right? And, no matter where I started out, very novice, and I was so fortunate to have a wonderful, amazing women boss for 10 years who did not lead from ego, who led from heart. And that shaped me, it molded me, it creates, when you do that, when you have that and experience that, you don't want to go on the other side. Does that make sense? Like, you just, you want to come from this place. And so I would say, if you're younger and getting out into the industry, there will be those moments. I mean, everybody has them, women, male. And I think you just got to keep moving forward and not take it personally. And I think what's harder, if first this natural reaction happens where you just want to be like, sit in your seat a little bit, right? But if you can just let it pass through you, and just find the people that are present and do care about what you're saying and do want to understand you and where you're coming from. I think that's, for me, I want to be surrounded by those people. I have no desire to be surrounded by people who come from a place of ego. So I don't know if that answered your question, but 100%. I guess you're not a tangent here, Nick. Keep going on this. Yeah.
Good deal. No, that's true words of wisdom that I hope my listeners get some jewels from, for sure. Anastacia, it has definitely been a pleasure. I want to thank you again for taking time to talk to us. If people wanted to get in contact with you to maybe learn more about the Bank Calumet project, or even, your development consulting work, what is the best way for people to contact you?
Yeah, I mean, happy to put my email here if they can. I think my contact's on ResElevate.com. I'm on LinkedIn. So love to connect to new people. And I'm so glad. I really appreciate you, Nick, reaching out and saying, hey, let's talk about this and your work. And I've listened to your podcast and you just bring some incredible people and stories. So I'm really grateful for this moment here that we get to spend together and seeing and hearing future people, right, talk about what they're working on, particularly around the region. Thank you.
For sure, man. It is my pleasure again. Thank you. This is another episode of the Wealth and Real Estate Development Podcast, better known as WIRED. I'm your host, Nick Smith. I want to thank you all for listening again today. Anastacia definitely dropped some major gems that I hope you all could catch. I definitely want to have her back on, maybe after the bank gets opened and we can see how everything is moving. And once the residents are there, I'm sure it's going to be a beautiful sight for sure. But again, thank you all for listening. This is the Wealth and Real Estate Development Podcast, where we build wealthy communities, wealthy families, and wealthy individuals, one development at a time. So thanks again. Let's go get wired up.
Thank you.